As I stood at the gala in my crisp black suit, sipping a drink that felt uncomfortably bitter, I watched my wife Sara, stunning and radiant in her designer dress, glide effortlessly through the room, her laughter mingling with the music. This was our scene, a world where appearances mattered more than anything. All eyes were on us, but what they didn't see was the chaos lurking beneath our polished facade. Started 3 weeks ago on a typical Wednesday. I received an anonymous email titled, "Open Your Eyes, Ben." Inside were photos of Sara at her boutique, the place I helped her start when we were scraping by. In the images, she wasn't alone. A man whose face was annoyingly familiar was too close to her, his hand casually on her waist as she gazed up at him with a smile that wasn't meant for just anyone. It was Eric, her so-called best friend, and our family friend. A title that had always grated my nerves, now even more so. They spoke closely, intimately, but it wasn't the kind of closeness born from friendship. There was something far more insidious to it. Pinned in the corner of each photo were insights. Wednesday before lunch, stayed an hour after closing, left together, red convertible. Innocuous notes that painted a damning picture, a betrayal wearing the cloak of innocence. I felt my heartbeat pound heavier with every image, the realization mixed with panic and a ferocious anger I barely kept at bay. As I watched Sara across the room now, laughing with Eric, who'd shown up last minute to the gala, the surge of betrayal bit at me again. I understood suddenly why she had insisted so much on this event, so eager to network, so fervent in her pursuit of wealthy alliances. Her eyes flicked to me, expression unreadable, perhaps sensing the storm brewing underneath my composed exterior. "Relax, Ben," her father, Justin, had said when all of this began to seep into my consciousness. "Sara just needs space to explore. It's just a night, after all." The audacity of his words replayed in my mind, each syllable a spear into my flesh. Space to explore? My marriage wasn't a vacation spot. As if the universe was mocking me, my phone buzzed. Another email notification. A subject line that made my stomach twist. "There's more." Daring not to open it in the middle of clinking glasses and idle gossip, I pocketed the device, concealing my turmoil beneath a mask. But the knot in my gut tightened unbearably. Every shared glance between Sara and Eric was a reminder of my isolation within this gilded ballroom, surrounded by people yet entirely alone. I needed more than suspicion, more than fragmented truths. The plot was thickening around me, and I was plunged deeper into its web. The intensity burned in my veins, the first spark lighting an inferno that promised retribution. Staying silent was no longer an option. As I watched them, the resolve solidified into something palpable. The time to act was coming, with meticulous planning, the likes of which neither of them would see coming. The tension inside me was nearly visible, a taut string ready to snap, and all it took was the simplest trigger to set my plan into motion. Sara's laughter rang louder than necessary now, wrapping around Eric as they stood too closely among the twinkling lights and muted conversations. I knew everyone watched them with the same indulgence they often reserved for misunderstood art or modern ballet, utterly oblivious to the deeper dance of deceit right before their eyes. Days passed like silent movie reels, each one replaying scenes of betrayal. I sought clarity amid the kaleidoscope of emotions. Anger, betrayal, yet also a strange sense of liberation. These revelations no longer served to shock but empowered me to strategize efficiently. Sara's behavior had changed incrementally over the last several months. Snippets of whispered phone calls cut short when I entered the room, or unexplained absences under the guise of work. I needed information, a truth serum stronger than mere observation. That's when I met Oliver, a friend from an old college acquaintance turned private eye. His fees were steep, but worth every cent if it led me closer to the truth. Oliver, with his gruff demeanor and sharp eyes, was the missing piece in a puzzle that promised a revealing picture. The weekend after the gala, I called him from my secluded office, away from the prying ears of the household. "Ben," Oliver stated, blending professionalism with a quiet intensity, "I've got updates. You're going to want to sit down for this." Heart pounding in anticipation, I closed the door, bracing myself for the confirmations that were sure to follow like domino pieces set to fall. He started with the basics, patterns of deceit always rooted in simple truths, a trail of unexpected bank withdrawals and lavish restaurant receipts, all corresponding with the timeline I had unknowingly constructed in my head. "Here's where it gets tricky," Oliver continued, words clipped, surgical in their precision. "Eric has a history, one not publicized because of his connections. Men like him always keep a sanitized image, but underneath." He let the words hang, allowing the implication to hit harder. "Let's say his relationships tend to start and end with messy overlaps." Suddenly, it wasn't just about Sarah's betrayal. It was about dismantling a long-standing alliance built on a lie. I envisioned my move as a grand chessboard laid out, every piece methodically positioned for that final, game-ending strike. In the quiet aftermath of our call, clarity washed over me, as if I was surfacing from a deep dive. Sara had unraveled the very fabric of trust on which we had built our lives, naively woven by my loyalty and her woven deception. But now the stage was mine, and I intended to take the final bow, one where I would lead subtly yet directly, making sure justice was swift and absolute, cast in shadows only to come into the light when least expected. Plans were laid with a precision I had used in my career countless times. Financial contingencies were analyzed, social networks reevaluated, every course of action considered. I was determined not just to confront but to expose, ensuring my revenge wasn't just personal but exposing their farce to the blinding light of truth. With every passing day, my resolve strengthened, every gesture Sara made under scrutiny like never before. This would end on my terms. Sara had given me the script, but it was I who would dictate the narrative to its final, climactic chapter. And that chapter promised revelations that even they would not see coming. The day dawned crisp and clear, a deceptive contrast to the storm brewing beneath my measured exterior. It was finally time to introduce the first act of my carefully orchestrated plan. More than suspicion or anger fueled me now. It was a calculated drive, clean and sharp like the cut of a diamond. With every passing hour, the seams of my marriage unraveled further, and yet in this flaw, I found clarity and purpose. That morning, Sara was at the breakfast table, sipping her artisan coffee, engrossed in her phone, likely coordinating another business meeting that had nothing to do with her boutique. I watched her from the doorway, steeling myself with the endless patience of a predator. Every movement was a deception. Every dulcet word left unspoken hung in the air, heavy with implied truths. "What do you have planned today?" I asked casually, slipping into the chair across from her. The inquiry was a simple, routine start, a question as innocuous as the sun streaming through the window. "Oh, just the usual," she replied breezily, barely glancing up from her screen, already weaving another lie. "Lunch with the girls, then probably heading to the boutique." "Sounds great," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The game was on. I left the house shortly after, but not before placing a tiny device I had acquired from Oliver beneath the dashboard of Sara's sleek car. A small tracker that would provide a geographic log of her day's movements. Technology often delivered poetic justice, and this would ensure I had tangible proof, untampered and undeniable. As she left, I received a notification on my phone syncing with the tracker's data feed. My heart drummed a steady beat, matching the rhythm of the unfolding plan. Throughout the morning, I kept tabs on her location, meticulously noting each deviation from her usual routine. At precisely noon, the signal paused at an exclusive restaurant, one we had enjoyed together for anniversaries. Each notification sent a pang of hollow nostalgia, tainted by the bitter tang of her unfaithfulness. Eric's name flashed in my mind, his smirk challenging, like he'd known all along he'd win the hand. But this game was far from over. Mid-afternoon saw the signal venture to a hotel downtown, the very epitome of discreet affairs played in silence. The final piece settled snugly in place. I had seen enough, felt enough, knew enough to take action that both corrected and exposed. Calling Oliver, I sorted through legalities, the frameworks of justice in a world that rarely paid notice when deceit was cloaked in the finery of the elite. I laid out contingencies with practiced ease. Within this dialogue, a plan formed in full, a conversation that concluded with a shared resolve. Late that afternoon, Sara returned home, adjusting her necklace with an absent-minded elegance that now seemed calculated, too deliberate. I waited, glancing up from my laptop as she entered. "How was your day?" I inquired casually, bracing for the ensemble of lies already spinning in her mind. "Eventful," But the boutique needed a lot of work today, she replied, dismissing the truth as effortlessly as she slipped out of her heels. Little did she realize, the carefully constructed walls around her perfidy were set to come crashing down. In silence, I watched as the pieces of my life realigned, not with the jigsaw of misplaced trust she had handed me, but with the architecture of something new, something unbreakable. My heart twisted with anticipation, the truth poised to strike with a precision honed to the sharpest edge. Tomorrow would come the beginning of the end, the first unveiling of a charade so skillfully hidden behind masquerading facades. And I, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, would ensure an audience unlike any other, a witness to a reckoning calculated with the keenest of edges. The next morning came cloaked in pretense, but it was the final day it would remain so. Clara's phone call was my catalyst, her bright voice just another tool in this unfolding sequence. Clara, a mutual friend who stood oblivious to the inner workings of my silent unraveling, was known among our circle for her inability to keep a secret. It would work to my advantage. "Ben, it's so good to hear your voice," she exclaimed, the receiver vibrating with her unrestrained energy. Exactly the kind of person you'd want spreading carefully curated half-truths. "Clara, I'm organizing a surprise for Sara. I need your help," I began, planting seeds even she wouldn't recognize as an eventual forest of revelation. The plan was set in motion, relying on Clara's penchant for colorful gossip. After our brief exchange, she was suitably agog with the surprise, without even knowing she was a crucial piece in my elaborate scheme. That evening, I suggested a dinner at our favorite restaurant, an intimate homage to our lives before all of this deceit began. Surprisingly, Sara acquiesced with little more than a smile, perhaps suspecting nothing beyond a gesture aimed at some cordial reconciliation. As we arrived, the atmosphere crackled with tension, though it remained unseen to those who glanced benignly in our direction. Just another couple enjoying an evening out. But the air was charged with the promise of an unveiling, and my heart strummed in time with the orchestration of our shared public facade. Midway through dinner, I allowed the conversation to drift towards reminiscence, painting soft shades of nostalgia across her features. These moments had become a stock exchange, a currency of affection, heavily invested but yielding no returns. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately," I ventured, offering a sentiment ripe with double meaning. Her eyes flickered with interest, an unspoken curiosity blooming. "Oh," she replied, delicately shifting her wine glass. "What about us? Just how long we've been together. Through so much. It's hard to imagine anything breaking that apart," I said, the statement heavy with irony, dangerously close to revelation. She paused, as if weighing the weight of my words. "Well, relationships need strong foundations and trust." That last word, teeming with hypocrisy, threatened to rupture my composure, but I held firm. The plan was unfurling with a precision that thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. "I've set a small anniversary get-together at our house tomorrow, primarily for our closest friends," I announced casually, timing it to perfection. "A few surprises that I think you'll love." Her polite smile was her only response, but I noted the flicker of unease in her eyes, an expression only I could read beneath her charming facade. As we finished our meal, the silent agreements and unspoken understandings between us made the world seem small, contained within the boundary of a table barely large enough to hold what remained of our wounded relationship. Retrieving my phone after we settled our bill, I checked for Oliver's updates, knowing he stood ready to reveal the players behind the scenes, a final coaching directing the unfolding drama. Tomorrow promised a climax unlike anything we'd encountered. A gathering of whispered secrets now coaxed into the open, a night dark and beautiful as the ink that would write the end of our story. And for Sara, the truth would be as relentless as the tide, unstoppable and irrevocably transforming all it touched. As the sun dipped below the skyline the following day, painting the neighborhood in hues of orange and pink, our home buzzed with anticipation. Friends mingled in the living room, clutching glasses of wine and murmuring quietly under the soft, melodic jazz that played in the background. The air was heavy with expectation, filled with the kind of energy that only happens when hidden truths teeter on the brink of discovery. Sara was the perfect hostess, orchestrating our small gathering with the grace and poise that had always drawn people to her. But beneath her polished veneer, I could see the fine cracks starting to form. She had picked up on the odd tension permeating the air, a sensation that clung to every word and half-concealed glance. Eric arrived fashionably late, his charm dialed up to the maximum, flashing that infuriating smirk of his as he exchanged pleasantries. I watched carefully, noting every touch, nod, and smile exchanged between him and Sara, each interaction reinforcing what I already knew. The evening's crescendo approached as Clara, true to form, loudly proclaimed her excitement for the surprise I had teased her with. Every head turned, curiosity piqued, and I knew it was time to begin. The room quieted, anticipation building to a tangible peak. "Friends," I announced, stepping into the center of our gathering. "Thank you for joining us tonight. There's something special planned." My voice cut through the murmur, drawing all eyes upon me, and more importantly, upon Sara. Sara's gaze caught mine, her smile faltering ever so slightly, revealing an undercurrent of unease. But she remained poised, expecting a benign spectacle, a dance or some orchestrated celebration, or yet another guise of love. Not this time. The foyer grew silent, the soft clink of glasses the only sound as I gestured towards a screen set in the corner. "I've prepared a little tribute to Sara," I said, and a murmur of excitement passed through the room. I clicked a remote, activating the projector, and images filled the screen. Initially, they were innocent, snapshots of happy moments, laughter in faraway places, shared achievements. But the narrative was about to shift. As the montage continued, the story altered, each subsequent image from Oliver's file, meticulously curated, unfurling the undeniable truth. The room gasped as the transformation unfolded. Picture after picture, Sara leaving her boutique, Eric's touch not one of friendship. Sneaked hotel lobbies, intimate lunches never confessed. A poignant silence fell, the weight crushing. Truths surfacing that no amount of denial could suffocate. I watched Sara's face pale beneath the light of raw evidence, her public mask slipping, shattering with each frame. Eric stood too stunned to move, charm dissipating into nothingness, leaving behind the hollow space of betrayal. "Is this true?" someone whispered, the hushed inquiry echoing in the charged silence. But words were unnecessary. The answer was illuminated across each frame, undeniable and searing. Sara's eyes finally met mine, wide and desperate, a silent plea behind the shock. But I offered nothing in return, only resolute finality. The game was finished, and the players fully revealed. The silence was deafening, the world slowing to an excruciating crawl, the fallout inevitable and welcome. Our lives had been dissected under the bright light of truth, leaving nothing to tether us to the falsehoods we had once nurtured. The reckoning had begun, and now it was time to witness who we would become in its aftermath. The silence that blanketed the room following the revelation was absolute. Each attendee was locked in the surreal tableau, processing the magnitude of what had just been unveiled. The montage flickered out, leaving a stark black screen that seemed to scream the truth into the void. Eric's face was a portrait of shock, eyes wide, mouth agape, the swagger he perpetually wore like armor now melted away. He turned to Sara, but she was already stepping back, distancing herself from any alliance with him that might tether her to this public humiliation. A solitary tear traced a path down her cheek, though I wasn't sure if it was from shame, anger, or the abrupt tearing away of her well-constructed facade. This is insane," Sara finally choked out, her voice a strained whisper that barely pierced the silence. But the evidence was overwhelming, seared into the minds of everyone present, leaving no room for doubt or denial. Seeing her grasp at any semblance of control, I remained calm, allowing the weight of her choices to settle fully upon her shoulders. The collective gaze of our friends and acquaintances was a jury she could neither influence nor escape. "What have you done, Sara?" came a voice from the back. Clara's, seeking clarity yet ringing with incredulity. Her question wasn't just directed at Sara but also aimed at filling the air with the accountability that the images demanded. Sara's head hung low, attempting to gather remnants of dignity from the shattered pieces of our marriage strewn across the room. It's not what it looks like," she said, but even she couldn't muster belief in her own words. The room's silence acted as a spotlight, focusing on her alone. I gave her the space to speak, not out of kindness, but to let the realization of her position take firmer root. Every attempt at justification was a step deeper into the quicksand she had fashioned herself. Each denial brought her one step closer to facing the reality she could no longer evade. But I didn't need to say another word. My part in this play was closing, the final act approaching, and Sarah's own admissions would be her farewell soliloquy. The night unfolded like a silent film, each expression, subtle movement, and shared glance telling a tale more profound than anything spoken aloud. With no resolve within her hesitation, the crowd began to dissipate slowly, respectably, murmuring gentle farewells steeped with implications and questions they'd certainly carry into the shadows beyond our front door. The shifting roles in this tragedy were clear, the lines drawn, leaving Sara and me in the eye of a storm that had been building for months. Years, perhaps. As the last guest departed, leaving behind whispers and pangs of sympathy mixed with shock, Sara finally turned to face me. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes told 1,000 tales. Anger, despair, and perhaps a hint of regret. "Why?" she breathed, though it wasn't entirely clear if the question was directed at me or the ether of our dismantled life. "Because, Sara," I replied with quiet resolution. It was time for the truth to see the light. Though my voice was calm, inside I felt the tremors of release, the unshackling of a burden I had not realized weighed so heavily. Amidst the turmoil, I caught a glimpse of what lay beyond the storm. A horizon free of lies, where the path stretched unencumbered, ready for whatever came next. The aftermath was beginning, and within it lay the promise of something new, as yet unformed, waiting patiently amid the debris. The echoes of the evening's drama still lingered in the air as Sara and I stood alone in the now empty living room. It felt surreal, a battlefield post-conflict, silent except for the quiet ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The walls that once exuded warmth were now sterile, bearing witness to the climax of our fractured narrative. Sara stood frozen, wrestling with the enormity of what transpired. I could see it, the internal storm swirling behind her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but words seemed insufficient, her voice catching in the obstacle of her own creation. Finally, she managed, "I never wanted this, Ben." A spark of disbelief flickered within me, fanned by the winds of anger and the ashes of remaining trust. "Didn't you?" I replied, my tone steady but cold. "Because you've been crafting this reality for longer than I allowed myself to see." She took a step toward me, intent in her eyes, a plea wrapped in desperation. It's been complicated. The boutique, the pressure of maintaining everything. Eric was just a reprieve, a moment, nothing more. I nodded, not as a gesture of agreement but to acknowledge her confession. "And the lies? The manipulation?" I asked, keeping my gaze fixed on hers. "Was that all just a moment too?" Her composure cracked slightly. "I was lost. I thought he could help me find something I felt slipping away, not just in our marriage, but within myself." Every word was a testament to her personal turmoil, but in the spotlight of the evening's revelations, they felt more like rehearsed lines than an apology. The weight of deceit lay between us, a chasm too wide to bridge with apologies or regrets. "Did you ever think about just talking to me, Sara?" I asked. "We built this life together. All you had to do was say something." She sighed deeply, a breath escaping as if she were tired of holding onto secrets. "You seem so driven, so focused. I didn't want to be the one thing that slowed you down." Listening to her shifted something small within me, but the simplicity of her reasoning only deepened the rift her actions had carved out. Her struggles, though genuine, were buried beneath choices that betrayed more than just vows. They betrayed the essence of the partnership we once valued above all. "And what now?" she whispered, the question a fragile thread between us, threatening to fray under the slightest tension. Her vulnerability was palpable, and perhaps, in another life, I might have reached out to soothe that fear. But here and now, the fissures left by dishonesty were too pronounced to ignore. "Now?" I repeated, letting the words settle into the charged atmosphere. "Now we figure out a way forward separately." The decision was firm, the outcome inevitable, and yet it came coated in bittersweet resolution. Her gaze dropped, acknowledging the finality of my words. Outside, the world carried on, indifferent to what had transpired within our small sphere. The answers she sought would have to come from within, as would the path she chose to walk on her own. As the night deepened, the shadows lengthened, and in their stretching forms, I found an unexpected sense of relief. It was the beginning of an end, yes, but also the end of a beginning. One where truth had found its way to the surface, irrevocably changing the course of both our lives. We stood on the cusp of something entirely new, the hardest steps behind us, leaving only the unknown path ahead. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, bathing the room in a muted glow, I found myself alone with my thoughts in the silence that comes after a storm. Picking up the pieces of a life reshaped by truth was proving to be an exercise in resilience. The house, once filled with echoes of laughter and whispered dreams, now stood solemn, a testament to the night's revelations. Facing the inevitable division of our lives, I started to consider the practical steps. The splitting of assets, the unwinding of our intertwined existence. But what consumed my mind more than legalities was the haunting question. How had we come to this? The clarity of hindsight offered little solace, a cold comfort in understanding my part in our disconnect, the moments I hadn't noticed her slipping away, entangled in the expectations I placed on us both. I called Oliver again, his pragmatic tone a reminder of the reality I'd invited him to unravel. "Morning, Ben," he answered, his voice as steady as the ticking seconds of an old clock. "How'd it go?" "As expected," I replied, emotion cloaked beneath the veneer of calm. "But there's more to the fallout than just facts and exposure." "Always is with these things," he noted, an understanding that spoke of past experiences. "Need anything else from my end?" "No, you've done enough," I assured him, grateful for his discretion and thoroughness. With the business end concluded, silence fell between us, a mutual pause before farewell. Sara had left earlier, before dawn, whispering something about needing space. I didn't press the point. We both understood the necessity of distance now. Clarity only emerges in the quiet absence of chaos. Last night had acted as a catalyst, forcing both of us to confront not just external betrayals but internal ones as well. Alone, I sat at the kitchen table, now devoid of the breakfast rituals that had once marked our mornings. A note lay there, Sara's handwriting curvaceous and familiar. As I unfolded it, brief and to the point, it read, "I need time to think." Simple words with layered meanings, revealing the complexity of a woman entangled in her own web. I felt a flicker of empathy, a recognition of mutual human flaws shared by us, by everyone. In the weeks that followed, I methodically set about reclaiming my life. The whispers that had lingered after the unveiling gradually faded, friends reaching out with kindness and support, while others respectfully kept their distance, allowing me time to recalibrate. The community, though small and steeped in gossip, was filled with compassionate individuals who understood the quiet pain that fractures a marriage. It was during one of those solitary mornings, as I cradled a mug of coffee, that Eric reached out to me. Not in person, but through painstakingly written words in a letter delivered discreetly. The sight of his handwriting stoked a flicker of apprehension, but curiosity won out. "Ben," it began, striking a careful balance between apology and explanation. He spoke of his own failings, admitting to a loneliness that he had not anticipated. A life surrounded by acquaintances yet devoid of depth. He claimed never to have wanted to hurt me, to wreck what was ours. His words painted a picture of someone not entirely unlike myself, caught in an unexpected course driven by consequence rather than malice. As I set the letter aside, I found a strange peace in his admission. It didn't absolve him nor Sara, but it did reinforce a truth that had become my guidepost. Each of us is fallible, capable of error, capable of redemption. And in that humanity lies the seed of forgiveness. Perhaps not today, nor tomorrow, but somewhere down the line, when memories of betrayal no longer sting and have instead become lessons etched in the heart. Facing the open road of possibilities, I breathed in deeply, ready to embrace whatever came next. This chapter had closed with more loose ends than I cared to admit, but the new narrative was mine to craft, an open canvas upon which I could reflect honesty, growth, and perhaps a touch of grace. In the aftermath of upheaval and the slow return to a new normal, life unfolded with unpredictable grace, as if tiptoeing around the remnants of what once was. As weeks turned to months, the transition continued, marked by unanticipated turns that seemed intent on reminding me that resolution is seldom linear. I found myself engrossed in work, the solace of familiar numbers and financial forecasts, a welcome respite from emotional entanglements that had dominated my thoughts. Yet, despite the intense focus, I couldn't entirely escape the intrigue of the ripples spreading out from our personal drama. It was during a routine meeting with a longtime client that the next twist presented itself. Carolyn, an astute businesswoman with whom I'd had many dealings, sat across from me in the conference room. Her demeanor, usually businesslike and composed, held an edge of something I couldn't quite define. A curiosity, perhaps, tinged with the sharpness of newly acquired information. "Ben," she began, a thoughtful pause hanging between us like an unspoken secret. "I've heard some things. About you, about what's happened recently. I didn't want to pry, but there's something you should know." I leaned forward, curiosity piqued. Her words hinted at a depth of knowledge somehow connected to Sara and the events that had transpired. "What is it?" I inquired, cautious yet intrigued by what she might reveal. "It's Eric," Carolyn said, leaning slightly closer. "He's involved in some business dealings that are questionable. I've pulled away for personal reasons, but I think you should be aware that there's more to him than meets the eye." Shock rippled through me, followed by a cold clarity. Eric's charm and connections had always seemed beyond reproach, but Carolyn's implication suggested a darker aspect I hadn't anticipated. A deeper layer of deceit unraveling within the respected fabric of his business. "I don't have all the details, but there's talk of fraud, of investments that have gone astray. Just thought it important to keep you informed," she added, her expression sincere, a gesture of concern beyond our professional relationship. "Thank you, Carolyn," I replied, allowing the information to settle, embedding itself into my understanding of the ever-evolving puzzle. "I appreciate your candor and discretion." The meeting concluded, yet the implications lingered, following me through the day like a shadow, inevitably circling back to the crossroads of Sara, Eric, and myself. More than betrayal of the heart was at play. My instincts urged me to delve deeper, to explore this new thread that had begun to weave itself into my understanding of recent events. With much to contemplate, I turned to Oliver once more, his expertise now vital in navigating the subtle complexities of Eric's hidden dealings. A phone call set the motion in progress, planting seeds of insight into what might unravel the mysteries surrounding Sara's entanglement with him beyond personal betrayal. As the days unfolded, anticipation grew, each step revealing insights into Eric's enterprises, strategies bound by the shadows of deceit. This revelation necessitated a broader scope of understanding, beyond the confines of personal grievances, into the realm of decisions and reputations tied to illusion. And in that pursuit, I found a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment not just to unearth deception, but to redefine my own narrative in light of these complexities. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, this saga was transforming from one of betrayal into a pursuit of justice and integrity for all it had impacted. Weary but invigorated, I awaited the truths that would emerge, confident that where there was smoke, there was always fire. The embers had only just begun to glow, and in their light, a new path awaited, one I was ready to follow to its inevitable conclusion. With Oliver's expertise and subtle inquiry, the layers surrounding Eric's clandestine activities began to unravel slowly. A tapestry woven from threads of deception, casting shadows in places I hadn't thought to look. The details collected spoke of unexpected alliances and questionable ethics wrapped in the allure of legitimate enterprise. Amidst the unfolding drama, I found myself drawn into clandestine meetings, piecing together the breadth of Eric's scheme. Oliver's networks and discreet sources meticulously gathered whispers that suggested Eric had been diverting funds and manipulating trust to prop up a slowly crumbling empire under the guise of prosperity. As the puzzle pieces fell into place, I realized that Eric's entanglement with Sara was part of a larger orchestration. A ploy, perhaps, to mask his insidious dealings, using his personal charms as a smokescreen while his professional endeavors slowly cracked under their weight. The magnetic charm he exuded had never been a mere external attribute, but a tool wielded with precision to further his ambition. My days became consumed with a deeper investigation into these dealings, working alongside Oliver to map out the scope of Eric's deception. The city, with its ever-buzzing corporate pitch, transformed into a ground zero, a stage for a high-stakes game where reputation was the currency and legitimacy, the most valuable asset to preserve or utterly destroy. With every discovery, it was clear that justice extended beyond personal vindication. It was about curbing the cascade of betrayal that threatened more lives than my own. This endeavor had evolved from personal restitution to a mission of ethical restoration, symbolizing the breadth of how deceit could permeate and devastate far beyond what was visible to the naked eye. Sara, distanced but not forgotten, had reached out once, her voice a cautious whisper through my phone's receiver, seeking closure, understanding. But the timing of Eric's imminent exposure took precedence now, necessitating a delay in personal reconciliation for a resolution that demanded focus and clarity. "We're close, Ben," Oliver assured me, his voice tinged with the grim satisfaction of unraveling threads of lies spun so expertly. "Once we've compiled everything, you can choose the direction to take. Legal action, public exposure. The cards are yours to play." The culmination of this endeavor loomed, truth standing on the brink of revelation, poised to descend like a hammer, firm, decisive, and unavoidable. My resolve never wavered, for what lay ahead was not merely an unwinding of Eric's machinations, but the dawn of a placed equilibrium, a balance to be restored amidst chaos. In those moments, hope fueled me, promising not just vindication but a semblance of closure to a chapter that demanded an end befitting the magnitude of its impact. This was not just about Eric or Sara, or even myself. It was about all who stood in the wake of deceit, their stolen trust a silent call for justice. The stage was set, its players prepared, and as the final act loomed on the horizon, I braced for the reckoning promised. A moment both an end and a new beginning, crafted from the ashes of deception, honesty, and perhaps a touch of grace intertwined. The day had finally arrived, a collision of truth and consequence poised to reveal a new landscape. Over weeks of meticulous preparation and quiet observation, Oliver and I had crafted a case so compelling that no shadow of doubt could obscure its validity. Law enforcement, regulators, and key stakeholders were waiting, hands hovering over the levers of justice, poised to descend with precision upon Eric's intricate web of deceit. As I walked into the bustling office that morning, there was a palpable tension in the air, a silent anticipation shared by those who had watched the unfolding theater of trust and betrayal with bated breath. Everyone knew today would be consequential, but its specifics remained shrouded to all but a few. From a corner office, I watched as the authorities arrived, their presence unassuming yet commanding, like the quiet before a storm. Step by step, they began to unravel the tapestry of Eric's actions, revealing tangled threads of manipulation and deception woven intricately into the fabric of his corporate empire. Eric, discovering the unraveling too late, was led away, his once confident stride replaced by shattered composure. The reality of his schemes laid bare, exposed to the glaring light of consequence that left no stone unturned, no misdeed unexamined. The company walls, once symbols of prosperity, now echoed with the whispers of those who witnessed the scene, a potent reminder that no artifice remains intact when truth prevails. Sara was informed discreetly, her connection to the events that transpired blurred by her distancing from Eric's dealings, allowing her to retreat into the shadows, seeking solace and understanding amidst the ruins of her own decisions. Her involvement, personal and tangential, became a lesson quietly absorbed, a reminder of paths ventured unwisely but not without hope for personal redemption. As the dust settled and news spread through networks and media, a sense of catharsis washed over me. The storm had passed, leaving behind clarity where chaos had reigned. It wasn't just about the exposure of Eric or the threads of our personal entanglements unwound. It was about justice served, a testament to resilience born from ashes. Closure, when it came, was quiet yet comprehensive. A new dawn painted over the ruins, promising growth and renewal. The finality of the events laid context not only to my immediate past but also to my future, marked by a narrative penned with honesty and an unwavering commitment to integrity. Reflecting quietly amidst the newfound calm, I understood that every betrayal, every truth uncovered, had been a stepping stone toward a place where authenticity reigned. Rebuilding would come, but now on terms defined by clarity and genuine connection rather than elaborate facades. At peace with the course charted, I stepped forward, embracing what lay beyond. A blank canvas waiting to be painted with fresh hues, unmarked by shadows of deceit. promising a future sculpted from lessons hard-earned but profoundly transformative. And there, in the tranquil aftermath, I found my own redemption. A path clear and unbounded, where the scars of betrayal softened, giving way to strength and hope born anew.